Okay, we're up and running. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to see that everybody remembered which day we were starting again, because it's been a while. It feels like it's been a while since we've had a chance to sit down and study a little Torah together. We've got another chair over here, I think. And it's nice to see that everybody came back on the same day. That's good. So we are going to pick up where the weekly Torah portion is. Someday we'll just have to make sure my vacation gets staggered so we can cover the parshiot that seem to get skipped each year. I think, do we have an extra copy of the Eitz Chaim? That's the Siddur. We need an extra Eitz Chaim. I think, you know, the shelf is empty.
We can share.
You sure? Yeah, pass it along.
Yeah, you know it by heart. So.
There's two more.
Oh. Wait, whoa, okay, now we need extra chairs. Hold on. Oh, we got some extra chairs there too. Okay. Yeah. But let's see if we can grab a couple extra chairs here on the corner.
And we still need how many more?
Yeah, we're actually pushing the limit of our Eitz Chaim in the room. Our Chumashim, yeah. No. It's, hold on, we got chairs.
Yeah,
For those of you who are comfortable, you need
I want you to be able to lean on the table.
Oh, no,
you have copies of the if you're okay without the Hebrew, you have an English only version. No. Yeah, okay.
Oh, wow.
Word got around.
Did you figure out?
Let me see. I got another.
We have things, you know.
Okay.
Special promotion.
Extra copies of the Chumash.
You guys need so much.
We got it, thank you.
You got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You know, it's a good problem to have.
Did you want this passed out?
Not yet. Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah.
I'll take care of the extras.
We didn't pass them out yet.
Okay. Yeah, no peeking at the cheat sheet until it's time. I hope we have enough. If not, we may have to share a few of the handouts. I think I made like 15, 16, but we might still be short. But again, it's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have. Sometimes when you don't have something enough to go around, it teaches you to share, which is going to be my rather cumbersome segue into my first question, which is, how do we need to share the land of Israel according to Bamidbar, this section of the Torah?
Do we share it amongst the tribes?
Exactly, right? So we've got, and again, by pardon to all the cartographers, we have roughly the land of Israel. And at the time, the upper borders is a little fuzzy. It's actually, this border is also a little fuzzy. The ones that we know very clearly are the Mediterranean and the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River and the Dead Sea, and then it gets a little fuzzy down here too. It's nice when you have water borders. It really makes it clear. So what we have to do is divide up the land, and you may remember from last week's discussion of the daughters of Slochad. They're worried about the inheritance of their father's portion and such. And what's going to eventually happen is there are going to be divisions according to the tribes, and then in the tribe, you'll divide up the land according to the number of people in the tribe. So that's roughly what the division is going to look like. Everyone got that picture? Right? And this basic division is meant to ensure, as we've discussed in previous years, that the individual Israelite will each get a fair share of the land that was promised to Abraham. That's why this whole system is being orchestrated in this elaborate division. It's that way everybody from each of the sons of Jacob will be able to get a piece, and each piece will be of equal value, even if it's of different size. Make sense? Okay, and land, of course, was the main form of wealth in the ancient world because that's where wealth came from. That is to say, food, because that was pretty much what most people dealt in. They grew food, they ate food, they sold food. Good? Okay. Now we're going to see a challenge to this whole system. You got to get the system out before you know how to challenge it. And so we're going to be on chapter 32 on your Eitz Chaim. If you're in the red Humashim, this is page 949. If you're in one of the other translations, we are in the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, and we are on chapter 32. So if you're in a different edition, don't worry. The words are still the same, although the translation may vary slightly. It's a little fact for copyright law. No one can copyright the Hebrew of the Torah because the Hebrew of the Torah is public domain, but you can absolutely copyright a translation of the Torah because that is the work of the individual publishing house. Their translators, their editors, they have worked to create that unique translation for the book, and therefore they can copyright the translation. But you can't copyright the Hebrew. That's why it's very easy to find tons of copies of the Hebrew Bible and far fewer translation copies, because those take a lot more work and people like to get paid for their work. I know, strange that people want to get paid for their work. All right, so have we all found chapter 32 from the book of Numbers? Page 949 if you're in the Eitz Chaim, but it could be something else if you're in something else. All right. Do I have a volunteer to read? Okay.
The Reubenites and the Gadites
Which are two of the sons of Jacob, or two of the tribes.
owned cattle in very great numbers. Noting that the lands of Lajah and Gilead were a region suitable for cattle, the Gadites and the Reubenites came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the chieftains of the community and said, the land that the Lord has conquered for the community of Israel is cattle country, and your servants have cattle. It would be a favor to us, they continued, if this land were given to your servants as a holding. Do not move us across the Jordan.
Okay, so what's going on here? What's going on is we have, in the book of Bamidbar, had a number of unfortunate wars. Well, they were fortunate to us in the sense that we won, but they were unfortunate in the sense that, as we've discussed, they were totally avoidable. The people who came out to stop us from entering the land of Israel, well, it was sad that they decided to try and stop us because we had to fight back. And in the process, what they are now talking about is we have gained lands on this side of the Jordan River that we have just defeated them. Reminder, our path from Egypt brought us up like this through the bottom of what we would now call the Negev of Israel. And now we are looping around to come in to Israel this way. What's that?
East Bank.
The east bank of the Jordan River, exactly. So we're now on the east bank. We are getting ready to cross over into what is affectionately called the west bank. Yay, yay geography. We're just using those terms purely geographically. We're not speaking politically. We're moving on to the west bank, which is going to set up the actual settlement of the land of Israel. So what we've just had here is the Reubenites and the Gadites, the people who come from the tribes of Reuben and Gad, said, well, wait a minute. Where we are now, here on the east, this looks like good cattle country, right? This is like Texas, reborn. We got a lot of cows. Our cows like it here. So we're good. Now, what does that mean? What are they actually asking for then? What is the because there's different ways to interpret their statement.
They're asking to have that land of the land that wasn't necessarily Israel, wasn't part of Promised Land. They want that to be their share, their inheritance.
Oh, well, okay, so you just made an assumption, right? Which is that there's an option, right? So we've got Israel, and then we've got, we're going to call it cattle country, right? And the question is, are they asking for Israel plus cattle country? Do they want their share in the land that was promised to Abraham and land over here?
They want that.
Do they want nothing in Israel and only the cattle country?
Yeah.
Right? But if they only want the cattle country, the fighting's done. right? We've already conquered that.
I know.
So does that mean they're done, right? They fought in those wars. They've done their tour of duty, and now they'd like to settle here and have fun storming the castle. For those of you who know Princess Bride, basically saying to everyone else, "We're good. We've got ours."
You can go into Israel, fight for that land.
You other 10 tribes, you go fight, and tell us how it goes. We'll stay here and take care of our cows. Is that what they're asking for? Right?
That's what they wanted, but what they asked for,
Well,
what they guaranteed,
well,
is that we will go with our brothers.
we haven't read that yet, because that's going to come in response. You read ahead. It's over the last few decades, you've read ahead. But that's, as we're going to see, in order to understand what Moses is about to say in response, we had to get this ambiguity good and mushy. We had to make sure that we weren't sure of what they were actually asking for. Because if we already knew, because we'd read ahead, what they were asking for, we would be interpreting it as though we already knew the outcome. And that's always a dangerous proposition. Whenever you're studying something in the Torah, you have to interpret it each year as though you don't know what verse comes next. And then let that next verse help you understand what just came. And then let, of course, the commentary that we're going to look at eventually understand all of it. But right now, it's a little unclear what they're really asking for. It seems like what they're asking for probably is option number 2, which is they're giving up a share in the land of Israel, and they'd like to have this land that's already been conquered. But the big question does still seem to be, are they done? Are they giving up their share and their obligation to fight? Or are they giving up their share, but they will still go and fight? That still seems to be rather ambiguous, and that's going to help us understand Moses' reaction. On to verse number 6.
Moses replied to the Gadites and the Reubenites, "Are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites away from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them?"
All right, so recognize the second sentence adds a different worry than the first sentence, right? The first sentence is, so you want your brothers to go fight and you're done. The second sentence, what's that asking?
It says, if they see that you don't want to go fight, they may turn around and not want to go fight either.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you know what?
I never thought of that, right?
Fighting's risky. Even though we know that God has guaranteed victory, every fight there are still casualties. So how about if we all just share this eastern portion and none of us go into the land of Israel, because one more battle could be my last, says each individual soldier, and boom, now we're out. As soon as everybody knows that there's an escape clause, why would you still fight? Right? Which is, by the way, a very important sentiment within Jewish law, which is if you don't have to fight, you'd be an idiot to fight. If you have to fight, then you should fight well. And what Moses is saying is, if you tell everybody that there's an option that involves no more fighting and that's just as good, then no one's going to go fight anymore. And so this is his concern at the moment. Onward, he continues to lambaste them.
Because that's what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to survey the land. After going up to the Wadi Eshkol and surveying the land, they turned the minds of the Israelites away from invading the land that the Lord had given them. Thereupon, the Lord was incensed, and he swore, "None of the men from 20 years old up who came out of Egypt shall see the land that I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for they did not remain loyal to me. None except Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, for they remained loyal to the Lord."
All right, so of course we're getting a flashback. Moses is having a flashback. He's like, no, 40 years ago, we had the spies go up and they came back and said, oh, fighting is hard. And we got stuck here. And me personally, says Moses, I've got stuck here and I didn't get to go to Israel. We have to read all of the second half of the Torah as partly influenced by Moses' own personal feelings of pain and betrayal, that because of the people's short-sightedness and unwillingness to fight, he was denied the ability to ever go and settle in the land of Israel. So every time he is responding, retorting, or attacking people, there is that personal dimension of what he has personally paid as a price for their lack of faith and vision. And it's coming out here in spades. He's saying, no, 40 years ago, we had this same problem, and that's why we got stuck here, and people who were over 20, they all had to die and get wiped out. You were the new generation. You are the guys who are supposed to have energy, supposed to have faith, and you're going to suck all of that faith and excitement and exuberance out of the entire nation because you want to take care of your cows. You can just feel his frustration.
The Lord was so angry at Israel.
And so is he.
And for 40 years, he made them wander in the wilderness until the whole generation that had provoked the Lord's displeasure was gone. And now you, a breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers to add still further to the Lord's wrath against Israel? If you turn away from him and he abandons them once more in the wilderness, you will bring calamity upon all his people.
All right, so yeah, he pretty much tears them apart because he has decided that what they're really asking for is a get out of war card. They don't want to go to war, that they have already fought in the war, the war against the people who attacked us in the wilderness. They've won what they needed. It's good for their cows. They're done. And he is like, if you're done, everyone's done, and then we might as well just bury ourselves here in the desert because we've done this before and it's another 40 years. And they needed to now respond.
It's also like they're saying, you know, God gave us that land over there, but you know what? We don't really want it. It's too hard for us. We're never going to win that fight. We'll stay over here and we don't want it. God's, wait a minute, I'm giving you this land and you tell me you don't want it? So pick something else?
So this is the other dilemma that we're going to come back to, which is, why are they picking this land over this land?
Good for cattle.
It's good for cattle, right? There's more money to be made here, right? This is a better place for their profit. I realize there wasn't really capitalism and profit margins and such, but this was the better place for their material wealth to exist.
Well, they're looking over and seeing the desert on the other side. It's just sand where the cows
Yeah,
are.
if you're sitting here north of the sea, you can see Jericho, and that's kind of impressive. But the rest of it is not exactly looking like the place you want to put your cows.
Everybody else is going to have to take up a new occupation. They haven't been farmers for a while.
Correct.
It's easier to maintain your own business and your own way of life than having to make a substantive change in how you live. So in many ways, it's easier for them to stay. I've got my cattle already. I don't have to go start plowing. I don't have to.
It's easier. It's likely to be better as a payoff because they could be cattlemen in the land of Israel. It's just not going to be quite as suitable for cows as it is on the eastern shore. So yeah, they're basically putting their material objective ahead, Moses thinks, of the spiritual reward of Israel, as well as the loyalty and duty to their brothers, as well as their faith that God is asking them to risk themselves as part of Klal Yisrael, the nation of Israel, to settle the land as a benefit for all of us equally. Remember our original equal waffles, our equal divisions, that was what we were supposed to be fighting for, was for everyone to have equally a good share of what God had promised to our ancestors. And now you want your share. Moses is just raging here. They're going to try and change the conversation a bit.
Then they stepped up to him, to Moses, and said, "We will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children, and we will hasten as shock troops in the van of the Israelites until we have established them in their home, while our children stay in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the Israelites is in possession of his portion. But we will not have a share with them in the territory beyond the Jordan, for we have received our share on the east side of the Jordan."
All right, so how are they recasting their request? This is what, by the way, they should have opened with.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to have to debate whether or not this was their original plan or whether this is their respin of what no, I didn't mean that. Actually, I did, but let me rephrase that. So what is the proposal at this point?
Our children, our wives over here in safety where the cattle can grow.
Right.
We'll come fight with you. And after we win the fight, we'll make sure you win. You guys take your portion over on that side, and then we'll come back here to the land that we wanted, because that's our cattle can do here.
So in a sense, it's a compromise,
Yeah.
right? They're saying we're not going to subject our families to the risk of war, even though everyone else's families will be. They'll be settled, and we'll have to fortify towns because there are still random people running around who could cause us trouble. But we won't come home. We won't stop fighting until everyone else has their share too. And now we finally get the statement very clearly: we really are not going to be asking for a share across the border. Remember, it was a little, it was just unspoken one way or the other in their initial statement, that they said they wanted this land. They didn't actively say they didn't want this land. Now they're actively saying, we don't want anything over here. So we'll be the troops, but we don't want even to get paid for it. We're not expecting any more. We've got our share. We are relinquishing any claim on the land on that western side. Sound fair? Okay. And Moses conditionally agrees.
Moses said to them, if you do this, if you go to battle as shock troops at the instance of the Lord, and every shock fighter among you crosses the Jordan at the instance of the Lord, until the Lord has dispossessed his enemies before him, and the land has been subdued at the instance of the Lord, and then you return, you shall be clear before the Lord and before Israel, and this land here shall be your holding under the Lord. But if you do not do so, you will have sinned against the Lord, and know that your sin will overtake you. Build towns for your children and sheepfolds for your flocks, but do what you have promised.
All right, and they agree.
They agree. The Gadites and the Reubenites answered Moses, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and all our other livestock will stay behind in the towns of Gilead, while your servants, all those recruited for war,
meaning of combat age,
cross over at the instance of the Lord to engage in battle as my Lord orders.
All right, so they shake on it. This is the agreement. What do you think? Fair?
Sounds fair.
Good?
Yeah. Sounds fair.
Problematic?
Well, I've often wondered, since they did build a small little town for the children
Mhm.
and the wives, did they leave men behind?
You mean,
To protect the whole tribe.
well, remember, they would have,
The Canaanites and the Reubenites go, or they would have had to leave some men behind.
well, anybody from the age 19 and under would have been left behind because they weren't old enough for combat. And that is quite, well, it is and it isn't. I mean, they weren't of combat age, but that doesn't mean that they weren't responsible for the commandments. That also doesn't mean they weren't very capable as far as agricultural work goes. Go to many countries today where agriculture is still a big deal. And 18, 19-year-olds, they're absolutely equal members of any farm labor. In fact, they may be relied upon more than many of the older members because they're still young. And then, of course, there would have been also, possibly other people that were unfit for combat, maybe they were injured or in other ways. So it doesn't say explicitly whether an additional portion. They seem to be saying anybody that you call up will go to battle, right? Anybody who is drafted will show up. That was their additional tweak to what Moses said, which is, yes, you call us, we'll go. You don't call us, we're not going to show up. There may be a slight modification there.
And I find it interesting, they say they'll be the shock troops. They put themselves right in the front.
Well,
I mean,
because they understood the implications of not saying that, which would be,
We'll stay back.
yeah, we'll guard the rear.
Yeah, we'll be in the rear. Anytime you need us, just, maybe whistle.
Yeah, give us a
blow
call.
us, give us a call. But they guarantee that they are going to be like,
Well, they had to say that to overcome Moses's very strong reaction, which is, you're going to be sitting at home? They had to swing the other direction. They had to say, no, far from being at home, we will actually be right where the fighting is hottest, right? We will be there. I see another hand, I thought.
I had just a technical thing, but the penultimate word in verse 25, as my Lord orders. Every other place, when they're referring to the Lord, it's capitalized.
Ah.
In this case, is it referring to Moses?
This is referring to Moses, and that's because wherever you see the Lord capitalized in this particular translation, you'll see it written out as like that, whereas here it's written out, actually, excuse me, all lowercase. It's not my strong suit. And that's the way that the translation tells you that when it's written Lord like this, it's actually the Yud He and Vav He name of God. When it's all capitals, it doesn't actually say the word Lord. It says God's proper name. And then we translate that as the word Lord because we pronounce it as the word Adonai, which is a form of the Hebrew word which means Lord. However, this particular Lord, the lowercase Lord that you're asking about at the end of verse 25, is written as actually Adonai with the Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud. That's the actual spelling of the word Adonai, which means my Lord. Well, actually Adoni, but.
Next time when we do the translation, when it's the capital L, we'll say, as God had ordered, and when it's Moses, we'll just say,
Well, you can't do that because God is usually the translation for the word Elohim, right? Because Elohim is more of the generic term for God in biblical Hebrew, and sometimes also the particular God, right? Meaning our God, capital G.
English isn't as clear as Hebrew. You're trying to put it
Well,
in
Hebrew's
language.
not always 100% clear either, but it would be handy if we could, translate the phrase, Lord, the Yud He Vav He, as something else. But everything else is confusing. One option is to translate it as the word Hashem, which literally means the name. Or you could just write, brackets, insert name here. That would also do the trick.
Or just use
Is the
Sharon.
reason they wanted to go to the front, is that because they felt guilty, or is there any reason that they were trying to redeem themselves from wanting to hold back at first?
I think that is our question, right? Are they, when they make their clarification statement, are they actually redeeming themselves because they were actually trying to bow out, or are they just doing that because they think it's a good idea? And that's unclear, and that's something that some of our commentators are going to wrestle with. Did you have a question, comment? Or?
No, I think it'll come up in the commentaries about the doing of justice and the offer, counteroffer, the acceptance. It's the theme that starts in Genesis with Abraham and God and Abraham purchasing property. It is part of what comes up in the commentaries, the doing of justice.
Right. And having that conversation of what is the right way to handle this.
Correct.
Exactly. All right. So let's get to our commentators, starting off with Bamidbar Rabbah, the Midrash on Bamidbar.
3 gifts were created in the world: wisdom, strength, and wealth. If a man is privileged to possess one of them, he can claim as his own the most precious things in the whole world. If he is privileged to possess wisdom, he has attained everything. If he is privileged to possess strength, he has attained everything. If he is privileged to possess wealth, he has attained everything.
All right, so let's make sure we can understand what the Midrash is trying to say here. All right, it's not saying that being rich is as good as being strong is as good as being smart. What it is trying to say is that if you have been blessed with one of these gifts, you should recognize yourself as having been completely blessed. But it is that idea of being blessed by the gift that the next paragraph is going to try and draw to our attention. That there are different ways to get these gifts. There's a right way and there's a wrong way.
When does this apply? When they are gifts of heaven and come through the force of the Torah. But the strength and wealth of mortals are nothing, as is borne out by what Solomon says. He said, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happens to them all.
Right? You can't say that, the person who is rich is the person who was wise, or the person who is the winner is the person who was the strongest. That isn't always the way it happens. We recently just had a Winter Olympics, and I'm sure all of you saw various stories of the number one in the particular competition having a mishap and going down and not winning the gold medal that everyone thought that he or she was going to win. Does that mean he or she wasn't actually the strongest? No. It just means that something happened beyond their control. And that's why we need to be very careful of where do we ascribe the blessing of wisdom, wealth, or strength? Where do we ascribe that to? Is it because we got it, or because God gave it to us? And that balance of humility in enjoying any of the blessings we may possess is what this midrash is about, which Jeremiah is going to drive home even stronger in a selection that is used as part of our Haftarah for Tisha B'Av.
And Jeremiah says, "Thus says the Lord, let not the wise one glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty one glory in his might. Let not the rich glory in his riches, but let him that glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, for that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, for in these I delight."
Right? You go around bragging about how smart you are, or how wise you are. Go around bragging about how strong you are, or how rich you are. You're missing the point, right? If you want to have something to be proud of, that is an accomplishment, that's something you truly have done, then that is only how well you are connected to God. Right? Everything else is not within your power. Right? Yes, you contribute to it, absolutely, and that's why we don't just sit back and wait for the lottery in order to provide us for a living. But ultimately, it is always a mixture of my contribution, God's contribution, and the rest of the universe. But for myself, my connection to God, that is the only thing that is entirely in my hands. So if I want to say, I did this, the only thing I can point to and say unabashedly, it was my ability that made me do this, is my connection to God. Everything else is dependent. Everything else is conditional. And that's why when our initial part of the Midrash says that if you have one of these gifts, you've got everything, it is if you really recognize that this gift that you have been blessed with is a blessing that is not just based on your own unique ability, but it is something that comes externally, that has come to you, then you'll recognize what a gift you've been given. Which they'll drive home in the last paragraph.
Yes, these gifts, when they do not come from the Holy One, blessed be he, will ultimately fail a man. Why? Because their gifts were not from the Holy One, blessed be he, but they snatched it for themselves. Likewise, in the case of the children of God and the children of Reuben, you find that they were rich, possessing large numbers of cattle, but they loved their money and settled outside the land of Israel. Consequently, they were the first of all the tribes to go into exile, as is borne out by the text. And he carried them away, even the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. What brought it on them? The fact that they separated themselves from their brothers because of their possessions.
All right, so obviously this Midrash doesn't really ultimately approve of the agreement. Right? Yes, it worked out politically, you might say, but spiritually, this is not a good thing for the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh also joins in with them on this. That they are now, when Babylon comes in, guess who's first?
Oh.
Right? Guess who's the first group that's going to be contacted by these foreign invaders? So, yeah, you thought you were picking the place that was settled and good and done. You actually made yourself more vulnerable. And secondly, there is a difference between living in the land that God actually gave us, along with all of the other tribes, and not. And when at this point in particular in our history, you had the option to simply move in, and yeah, it wasn't going to be quite as profitable, and you were going to get, same return on your cows, but you still could live in the land. Like no one was going to starve just because they moved their herds across the river. Why didn't they? Why not be together, especially at this critical moment when we are trying to found ourselves as a nation? Why not stick together, even if it's not quite as lucrative? Well, because it's not quite as lucrative. And therefore, the wealth that they gained by that decision ultimately runs through their fingers, right? It vanishes. It is something that is lost because they grabbed it for themselves rather than doing what was right and then allowing blessings to come in that way. Make sense? All right. Onward.
This bears on what Scripture says. A wise man's understanding is at his right hand, but a fool's understanding is at his left.
Which, by the way, has nothing to do with being right or left-handed.
Oh, okay. The expression, a wise man's understanding is at his right hand, applies to the good inclination,
Right, the Yetzer HaTov, the impulse we have that draws us towards good things.
which is set on one's right, while the expression, a fool's understanding is at his left, applies to the evil inclination, which is set on one's left.
Right, so metaphorically, the Yetzer Hara is considered to be on the left-hand side, and the Yetzer HaTov is considered to be on the right-hand side. So therefore, a wise man's understanding is at his right, and a fool's understanding is at his left, is saying that there are two directions in life. There are choices that we're going to make, and we have to decide which one to listen to, which one we are going to follow as we go. And if we go down the right side, that is to say, if we go down the side of good, then we are wise, and if we go down the side of the evil inclination, then we are a fool. But sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference. Right? Sometimes a fool thinks they're being wise by doing something that's foolish. And that's the great trick of that evil inclination, of thinking, hey, man, we got a deal here. We'll settle right here, and this will be great. And then, yeah, for your descendants, it's actually going to be pretty bad to be where you are. That's not really the best place. But it seemed like a good idea at the time. Right? How many times have people said that?
Yes.
So onward, continued.
Another explanation is that the expression, a wise man's understanding is at his right hand, refers to the righteous who apply their minds to the Torah, which is on the right. As it says, at his right hand was a fiery law unto them. While a fool's understanding at his left alludes to the wicked who set their minds on getting rich. As it is said in Proverbs, in her left hand are riches and honor.
Right. So how do you use your talents? How do you use your energy? How do you use your focus in life? Do you organize your life with Judaism as symbolized by Torah at its center, and then making a living and doing other things comes naturally as an extension of that? Or do you focus and organize your life around getting rich? And then, maybe being Jewish sort of is also part of the package, but it's not the hub of everything. It's not what's organizing how you run your life. And what the Midrash is saying is that if you organize your life around getting rich, you're an idiot. Because that's no way to organize a life. Doesn't mean you can't get rich. Absolutely, if you organize your life around Torah, you can still be blessed and lead yourself and your family to a very comfortable life, but on a much more stable organization, a much better focus. And that's the difference in this case. He's trying to say between one hand smart, one hand not so smart. Make sense? All right. And now getting back to our Torah text.
And another explanation, the expression, a wise man's understanding is at his right hand, applies to Moses, while a fool's understanding is at his left, applies to the children of Reuben and the children of God, who made the subordinate thing into the main thing and put the subordinate thing first, but they cherished their property more than human life.
Whoa, that's a bold statement, right? They were more concerned about their property than human life. What possible proof text could you have for that?
Yeah.
Keep reading.
They said to Moses, we will build sheepfolds here for our cattle and cities for our little ones.
Which one did they mention first?
Cattle.
The cows, right? We're going to build places for our cows, and then we'll also build something for our kids. If you're doing a hierarchy of priorities, don't you normally list the thing that's most important first? I mean, you're worried about where you're going to put your cows before you're worried about where you're going to put your kids? That seems to be implied by the order. And then what they're going to double down on is show the difference between how you can have both, but change the order between them and Moses.
Because that's what Moses said to them. That's not right. Rather, do the more important things first. Build your cities for your little ones, and then afterwards build folds for your sheep.
Right. When Moses responds to them and says, all right, if you're going to do this, then this is what you're going to do. When Moses responds, he doesn't repeat their words verbatim. He flips the two parts of the sentence. He's like, all right, fine. Build for your kids, hint, hint, and then take care of your cows. So Moses very subtly gives them a rebuke by saying, why did you mention your cows before your kids? Right? Take care of your kids first, then your cows, and then come and fight alongside of us.
It's like that's going back to how you you build a foundation of children
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of building them in Torah, and he's already seeing, well, you're not there, so let me remind you.
But think of how easy it is to slip into that mindset. I mean, how many people spend their life working for their kids, but their kids are not really at the top of their priority list, right? I'm sure if you ask the Reubenites and the Gadites, why do you want your cows and your flocks to be successful and to be prosperous and all that, they would say, for my family. Right? I want my cows to flourish in order that I can leave something to my kids and they'll be well taken care of and will never go hungry and all of those. They're not doing it just because they want a big bank account or a big herd in that case. They're doing it, I'm sure they would explain, for their families. And yet, despite that underlying belief of what their good intentions are, their true intentions, perhaps even hidden to themselves, are revealed by their word order. Of they're going to take care of their cows first, then their kids. And many other people feel the same way. I've got to get ahead at work. I got to get this next promotion, and then I'll be able to spend more time with the kids, and then I'll be able to do this, and then we'll have this, that shared experience that we all look. But that keeps getting put off until the professional has been handled first. And that's considered wise, right? It just makes sense, right? You got to get settled. You got to make your mark in the world. You got to get ahead in business. And then you can take care of the little thing. I mean, kids. I mean, the most important part of my life, which apparently is less important than what you were doing, even if you thought you were doing what you were doing for them. But it's really, really hard to get that balance right, which is why you need to make Torah the hub, because that'll keep you balanced, which you'll still put food on the table, but also be able to, take care of the important things like your family. And God is going to chime in.
The Holy One, blessed be He, said to them, seeing that you have shown greater love for your cattle than for human souls, by your life there will be no blessing in it. Of them it says, an estate may be gotten hastily at the beginning, but the end thereof shall not be blessed. In the same strain it says, weary not thyself to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. And who is rich? He that is contented with his lot, as it says, when thou eatest the labor of thy hands, happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee.
How does that last verse prove that being rich is to be content with what you've got? Well, what are you eating in that last line from Psalms? Just say it again, right?
When you eat the labor of your hands.
Right. So what are you eating?
The stuff you earned.
The stuff you made. The stuff you earned. Right. When you eat what you've earned, then you'll be happy. Not when you eat more than you've earned, or when you eat 200 times what you've earned.
Or maybe when you eat something that you haven't earned, but you took from somebody else.
None of that is what makes you happy. Right. It's not that there is a fixed number of when you eat 1,200 units of grain, then you'll be happy. When I have a 6,000 square foot house, when I have this particular luxury car, when all my kids, I've taken care of their private education, then I'll be happy. Is there a light coming through?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were like, no. So when you're happy with what you have, you're happy. If you're not happy with what you have, having more will never make you happy, because you can never have more than what you have. Because if you have more than what you have, then that's what you can now have, and you still want more.
There's the promise at the end of that, which is the most important. It shall be well with you.
Exactly. Almost as though finding contentment with what you have is part of what will actually create the right circumstances for you to appreciate the blessing you have, which if we go back to our very first text, if you remember, any one of those three blessings, with wisdom, with strength, with wealth, any one of those is blessing enough for a person to feel that they have everything and that they should be grateful for what they have been given. And any one of those three wishes or blessings could also be pointless if you feel that you got it in the wrong way. That is to say, if you feel I'm the only one that's ever, made anything of my life. I worked hard to become, the best scientist ever, and that's why I'm so smart. And you never actually notice, actually you had teachers, you had parents, you had some gifted DNA, which helped certain, academic and analytical problem solving, enzymes in your brain. And maybe God actually helped orchestrate a few circumstances for you, because you could have been born to exactly the same people with exactly the same genes in a different time period or a different GPS coordinate on Earth, and you never would have had the chance to develop the brilliance you have, right? Different zip, or even a different zip code, exactly. And you never would have had the same opportunity that you have now. So what you've got now, this blessing, is truly a blessing that you have enjoyed and grown with your own hands, and you're happy with what you've grown, but it is something that you can't take 100% credit for, which is something that the Gadites, if they had stayed right where they were, do you think they ever would have realized to themselves, well, this land was won by all of us, by the other tribes. They fought for this too, but they've got no share over here. That's not really fair. No, they just thought, hey, good land for cows, and it's ours now, so it can be ours now. Rather than, why don't we add this to the two parts and then share equally? That wasn't their proposal. Their proposal was, that's good, I'll take that. And that graspingness is why they are being blasted by, Moses in the Torah and by the Midrashim. Onward, because we're only got 10 minutes left.
The children of Gad and Reuben wished to tell Moses that despite his great wisdom, he had misunderstood their intention. Out of respect for him, they approached him to tell him quietly, "Our master, you have not understood our words and our intention. We do not wish to settle here immediately. Rather, we shall pass over armed and go to war with our brethren."
All right, so Barbanel, I wanted to make sure we knew that not every commentator was anti-Reuben and Gad. He says, no. Moses misunderstood, right? And, it's very likely that, as we discussed when we were first reading Moses's response speech, that Moses was responding to the spies 40 years prior, and he heard what the Gadites and the Reubenites were asking as though it was just a replay of 40 years before. And so when they asked him to stay, he heard, "Oh, you just want to stay here and give up." And it's like, no, that isn't what we meant. So Abarbanel is saying, yes, Moses, God forbid we should ever say this, but Moses misunderstood. He didn't understand what they were asking for. He was thinking they were asking for what the other people asked for. And that's, a difficulty as a leader. When you have similar people coming with similar requests, sometimes they have very different underlying intentions, and the details can be substantially different. But if you treat them as they're all carbon copy, then you can get into trouble. And that's what Abarbanel's opinion is. Now, he is not unanimous in this. That is to say, there is disagreement about whether the response of the Gadites and the Reubenites is actually what they wanted, or whether that is their modified proposal, as we discussed. And so Akedat Yitzchak is going to give us the alternative way of reading this.
Indeed, it appears that Moshe, our master of blessed memory, with his wealth of wisdom, understood their true intention.
So I hope you picked up on the fact that the first sentence of both of these commentators is exactly the same wording and exactly the opposite conclusion, right? Abarbanel, with all of his great wisdom, had misunderstood, and Akedat Yitzchak, with his great wisdom, he understood perfectly well. Right? So there is good room in any Jewish debate for differences of opinions, even 180 degrees opposite, as we get right here.
Which also lets us know that when we talk to somebody, they may not exactly understand what we mean either.
Yes. And perhaps we're not Moses, so all the more so, we're more likely to misunderstand what someone else is saying.
With good, but not because of evil intentions. It may just be misunderstood.
Or we may think that we are hearing in what they're saying as being something someone else said to us, which perhaps was wrong. And then we're, coming down with the big hammer when there was no need. Yes, that happens all too often.
That's how the commentators phrase it. It appears as if, it sounds as if.
Well.
And so there's a very wise way of framing your disagreement.
Absolutely. So what I hear you saying is that you want to stay here and not do any more work? That's much better than saying, "Oh, it's all 40 years over again. I'm having flashbacks." Perhaps Moses could have massaged his response a little bit, but far be it from us to criticize Moses.
Okay, that this says, no, Moses understood their true intention, but their original intention was to not pass over with them to war. And this is what they meant when they said, do not bring us over to Jordan. Moreover, it is not written, the children of God and the children of Reuben said to him, but rather, and they approached him and said, meaning that they had heard what he said and had reconsidered, and thereafter they came back to him with their answer.
All right, so his first proof text is way back at the beginning of 32:16, at the beginning of their discussion, right? What do they say at the very end of verse 16? The verse 32:16.
The bottom of 950.
Well, right. It's actually the do not bring us over the Jordan is verse 5, 32:5. So it's 950 if you're in the 8th sign. And it says, it would be a favor to us, or if we found favor in your eyes. If this land were given to your servants as a holding, do not move us across the Jordan. Right? Alta Avrenu. Right? Don't take us across the Jordan. Don't make us pass over. That sounds, says Akedat Yitzchak, like you're saying none of you want to come across the Jordan River.
Ever.
And you may be walking it back in your response, but that's not what you really meant when you started. When you started, you really meant we don't want to go across the Jordan. Us, our kids, our cows, nothing. We're done. And his further proof of that, comes at the very bottom of page 950, which is with verse 16, where they say Vayigshu, and they approached, right? They drew near. And that sounds, according to Akedat Yitzchak's interpretation, like Moses gave them this tongue lashing, and they all went home and went, man, we really blew that. Tell you what, how about if we offer to fight, but leave our families behind? Let's see if he goes for that. And then they came back, they drew near to Moses and made the second proposal. That's how he's reading that Vayikshu. Because otherwise, why wasn't it just Vayomru? Right? Moses said, and they said. That's how conversations work. I say, you say, I say, you say. We go back and forth. And the only reason why we would have a new verb is because they had left after he had blasted them. And then they drew close to make a counter proposal. But the counter proposal was modified from their original proposal. Now, it's a very sound opinion. It's also one that has a couple problems, which is vayigash, this verb, can sometimes mean, and has meant in many other places, a supplicant coming before a power in order to make an appeal. For example, when Abraham steps before God to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, it's vayigash. He comes before. Now, he's already been talked to by God about this topic. We could argue that he had gone away and then thought about it and said, it just doesn't seem right. I'm going to go back and talk to God about it. It could be. But the second most famous case is the case of Judah. When Judah is arguing on behalf of Benjamin, who you remember was falsely accused of stealing the goblet from Pharaoh. Well, not from Pharaoh, but from Joseph the vizier. We again hear the phrase, all of you can go, but he will stay forever. And then the whole Torah portion is named for it, Vayigash, and Jacob,
Judah.
The wrong J, and Judah steps forward and argues on behalf of Benjamin. Now, again, we could argue that he went off and sat and thought about it and then came back, but the flow of the story really feels like Joseph puts down the decree and Judah steps up immediately. So Akedat Yitzchak's interpretation here is not a slam dunk. It certainly has merit, and it's absolutely a viable interpretation of the text, but it's not 100% like no one else should ever be able to disagree with this. There's good reason to believe that Vayikshu is just their way of saying, okay, maybe we talked to you as an equal, and that was our bad, and we weren't deferential enough, and we weren't clear enough. Let us propose something again, Moses, this time framed a little more clearly for what we are offering. And that would explain why the different verb is being used here rather than just vayomru. What do we think? Okay, but ultimately, whether they were proposing their true intentions the first time, or whether they just misspoke the first time, or whether Moses misunderstood them, there still seems to be this underlying tension of how are they making their decision? What is it that is at the top of their priority chart? And is that leading them to the right destination? And it's hard for us to second guess them, but we can always second guess ourselves, which is to say that when we are making decisions, do we constantly review our priority list to make sure that the decision we're making is being made with the best of our priorities, rather than something that might be further down the list? It's very easy to get caught up by needs and by demands and by pressures to organize our priorities on whatever has been most loudly pushed in front of us, whether that be a bill, or whether that be a job demand, or whether that be something else, and not reflect as we are about to take care of each task. Is this task really what I should be doing at this moment? Is this really my priority, or is this secondary to my true priorities? Do I need to do it because it's secondary and supportive, or should I find a way not to do it because it's not really even supportive of my true priorities? And how did I get myself in this mess? At which point you can cut yourself out of the mess and move on. But that constant reflection, what are my priorities? What are my priorities? What are my priorities? And am I truly pursuing them with the action I'm taking, is one that we should constantly reflect on. You've all got a head start on that because today you made it your priority to come study Torah,
Right.
which means at least for the last hour, your priorities have been spot on. And hopefully you're, oh, what's that?
And Moses will be proud.
And you should be proud too. Remember, as Jeremiah said, you know, if you're going to be proud of anything, be proud of this, how well you have worked to connect to God. So hopefully you'll be back not only next week, but for all the opportunities you can find to deepen that connection and understanding. And with that, have a good day.
No, you can keep it. You're allowed out.